Sean about his brain, the podcast where I, Sean, embark on a journey to understand what's happening in my own head. Spoiler alert, I have no clue, but that's precisely why we're here. In each episode, I explore questions about the brain that I believe will resonate with all of us. Like, why can't I turn my brain off at 3 a.m.? Why my memory only works when it feels like it? And why my brain seems to betray me when I need it most. Listen, I'm not a scientist. I'm no expert. I'm just a guy looking to unravel the mysteries of my own mind. Fortunately, I happen to know a cognitive neuroscientist who is an expert in the brain, and I get to ask him all the questions I want. So, if you're curious, confused, or simply along for the ride, welcome. And hey, if you like what you hear, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe to the podcast, or whatever it is you do wherever you listen to podcasts. I don't know how the algorithms work. I just know that your support keeps this journey moving forward. And together, we might just discover something remarkable. This is John Teaches Sean about his brain. Let's get started. Hey, John, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Sean. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Good.
What's on your mind this week?
Well, I know we've talked about a little bit about how perceptions are created in the brain, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a lot in the future. But it's everything that we see and experience is rebuilt in the brain. The brain's machinery rebuilds this image, and that's kind of what we perceive. So because of that, our perceptions could be influenced by other things going on in our mind. And I just read this really cool study actually the day before yesterday about researchers that recruited a group of participants, and half of them said that they like spicy foods, and half of them said they do not like spicy foods. And then they had these tubes set up in their mouth. They put them in an MRI machine so they could measure an fMRI. We talked about what that is, where you have the brain at rest and then you have the brain active doing something, and you subtract those out. And what you have left is the areas of the brain that were active during that task, so you can see what brain areas are involved.
Right.
And they had in the bottles, they had a really mild salsa, and in one bottle, in the other bottle was a hot salsa. And they would give them a squirt of these different salsas, and then there was a third bottle was water to rinse it out, and they could take some water to cool down. And they would, before they would give them one of the two, they would tell them whether the salsa they were going to get, what level of heat it was, as if there were like several levels when there wasn't.
Right.
So they had peppers. I think like 2 blue peppers was mild, 2 red peppers was hot, and then there were combinations and different things. Or maybe it was 3. Anyway, they found that when they primed them that it was going to be really hot, even when they then followed it with a mild sauce, that people still perceived it as being one of the hotter that they had experienced. But then they also found that for some of them, if they said it's the hot and they said they like spicy, they were more likely to say that they liked that, or they rated it higher than those who said they didn't like spicy. They rated it lower, even though it was mild in both cases. So it's just a really interesting study about how what we're thinking can change how we experience something. And it reminded me of a study from graduate school that we talked about that at the time I thought was really cool. Is some researchers paid college students in the lab to stick their fist and arm down almost to their elbow into a bucket of ice water and see how long they could keep it there. And they would pay them, the longer you keep it there, the more you make. And so there was an incentive to keep your arm in the cold water. And they found that they would have them look at pictures while they had their arm in the water, and they said this is to distract you so that you can keep your arm in the water longer. And when they would show pictures of a house burning or somebody's arm gashed open or just some really negative photos,
Mm-hmm.
people would pull their arm out of the water fairly quickly. And when they would show pictures of like a seashore with a palm tree leaning in, and breezy, beautiful mountain sceneries, when they were positive images, they would keep their arm in there significantly longer. So it's this the phenomenon is taking what you're experiencing now or what you are thinking, what you're expecting, and having that influence your perceptions.
So I was just going to ask. So you said it's what you're thinking, not only what you're being told, but and I this may be way off. I watch a lot of movies, and a lot of movies throughout my life, and I can remember being a movie where when someone brings it up or anybody asks, I'm like, I do not like that movie. That was not good. Blah, whatever. And I, for whatever reason, go back and I watched a movie later, much later, like years later, and go, what was wrong with me? That's a good movie. And I've kind of settled on my bro science tells me that where I'm at in my life, whether, I'm unhappy at work or unhappy in a situation or whatever my thoughts are at the time, sometimes, it influences my taste. Like I didn't like the movie because I was at a bad point in my life, maybe. Or there's sometimes probably that I do like a movie, that I go back and watch and go, that's not a good movie. So is there any validity to my bro science here that like where you're at in life, what your thoughts are, if you're just kind of in a negative place or even a positive place, it can influence your likes and dislikes?
Yeah, score one for bro science because
Yes.
that was right. So some
Yes.
other things that influences is who you're watching it with. If you're
Oh.
watching it with people that laugh really hard at a funny movie,
Uh-huh.
you're going to remember it as being a great movie. If you're watching it with people that just don't think it's that funny or their minds are somewhere else, you're going to think that wasn't a very funny movie. In fact, it doesn't even have to be other people because there's studies to show that they had people reading cartoons out of the newspaper and rating how funny they were. And for a group of them, I'm reaching for a prop here. For a group of them, they had a pencil and they would make them hold it in their mouth like this. So for those of you listening and can't see, I just put a pencil crossways in your mouth and hold on to it. And that would change how they rated how funny it was, because it's hard to smile if you're holding a pencil in your mouth. And this is the thing about the brain. It takes in signals from everywhere. We know that, but it also takes in signals from what your body is doing. And when you smile, the muscles that change the face of your shape send the signal that I'm smiling now. This is funny or this is good. And that also influenced how funny they thought the cartoons was. So how you react, how your friends react, it helps determine whether you think something's good or funny or not.
And that affects your memory of the event.
It affects your memory of the event. Exactly. And it's not, it's real. So it's not like a fake effect. It's real. Like the hot sauce story I was just telling you,
Mm-hmm.
the fMRI showed that for those who said they love spicy food, when they would get the two red peppers saying this is going to be the hottest level, their amygdala would become a little bit active. And you remember the amygdala is kind of the fear center.
Mm-hmm.
And that always responds when you're in danger or you're afraid. Those that said they hated spicy food, when they saw those two red peppers, their amygdala activity was like, it became very extremely active, like, oh no, this is going to be really bad. And so now that's what influence. So there's brain changes when you get information ahead of time on what you're going to experience. Your brain prepares you for what you're going to experience, and that affects your perceptions of it.
And is that true? I think I heard you say, but is that referred to as priming?
Yes, priming is when you give somebody a clue into what they're about to experience, it primes them for that, and it gets them ready for what they're going to experience. Like this is going to be really hot. Now you've just
Mm-hmm.
primed them to be ready for something really hot, and even if it's not really hot, they're more likely to experience it as that. I feel like some people are going to be like the students I told about in the last episode, where they're going to go use this for evil with friends and family.
I haven't done it yet, but I think I am still in the camp that we have to add some kind of language to say the information you receive from this podcast is not meant to be used for evil.
That's right.
Don't go experiment on your family members and friends. Just take the doctor's word for it. It works. All this stuff works. But yeah, I haven't done it yet, so I don't know what our liability is here. But no, I do feel like this is interesting. And in the last episode that we did on memory, I felt like that was going to be our last episode on memory. But as I do to you, it feels like almost every week. At the end of that episode, you were talking about losing your keys, and we just dipped our toe into the water of some things you can do. I mean, I'll use the term everybody knows, life hacks, but I wanted to maybe get into, if you know any, I hate to put you on the spot here, but of any ways to maybe help people if they are having problems remembering things. Like, here's what brought all this up. A very long-winded way to get to. There was a guy who couldn't remember his car keys, and it caused him to be late. This is a real story, a real person, and his hack was, he was like, well, I never forget my lunch that's in the fridge. So he just takes his keys and puts them on his lunch in the fridge. And he never forgot his keys again, as long as he remembered to put his keys on his lunch. So anyway, that when we wrapped the episode and I kind of started to think back on what we were talking about, I did think there was room for more discussion about things like this.
Mm-hmm. That's a great hack, by the way.
Yeah, again, not mine. Somebody told me about that they did it, and it was a very, it was like kind of an aside. It wasn't even a big deal, so it didn't really resonate with me that much until you brought up losing keys, and it's funny that we're talking about memory because, that memory came back to me, and I was like, man, I wish I could have brought that up on the podcast. So that's why we're circling back yet again to memory. So my question to you is, do you have any of those, any suggestions or ways that people can remember things?
Yeah. There's, you have to use different hacks for different types of memory.
Okay.
If you're trying to remember a list of things or like you're going to go to the grocery store or something like that, there's a hack for that. If you're trying to have memories be more meaningful as you experience them, so you can remember them better later, there's kind of a hack for that. Why don't I start with the list of
Okay,
things?
yeah, that's
a good place to start. And you can also use this to impress people, because I would do this with students and show off a memory skill where it looks like you can just remember everything given to you, and they would be in awe until I told them the trick of it. And I think with
oh wait,
I would do this with law
you.
enforcement.
I know you did this to us.
Yeah.
And I don't know the secret now. I don't know if I want to peek behind the curtain because I was so impressed. I thought you could remember everything that off a list. Okay,
Yeah.
so now you open the door. You got to tell me how you did it.
Well,
Okay.
and with the reason I did this with police officers, I was talking to them, trying to sell Preflex training,
Right.
and to say, if you work with your brain, you can do these things. Like, I can remember this list, and we've known this for thousands of years. We've known this hack, but nobody uses it. And if you just work with your brain, you can remember a lot of stuff. And that's what Preflex is about. It's about working with your brain so that you can respond better, process things more efficiently, and all of that. It's just, you need to know what you need to know, and then how to do it, how to work with the brain. So I'll let you peek behind the curtains, but let me set it up first to say, let's do this. I hadn't planned on this, but I didn't know really I was going to do this, but let me just on the fly here try this. Instead of doing, I think with police officers, I would do a list of 20. let me just do a list of 5 things,
Okay.
and I want you to come up with an object. So just come up with your first object. Like, what is an object you want to put on a list?
Coffee cup.
Okay, a coffee cup. All right. So the first thing is a coffee cup. And if you're listening and you're not driving, you can write these down. Number 1 is coffee cup. Number 2, what do you want it to be?
Is it an object or what's two? Just
Object. Yeah, just
an
another
object.
object.
A lamp.
Okay. And then number 3.
I'm like Brick from Anchorman right now. I'm just naming things in my office.
That's perfect.
But
number 3.
A pen.
Okay. And if this doesn't work, we can go back and edit this out.
Oh,
right?
I'll just cut this out. Yeah.
Okay, good. That's good.
I'm kidding. It's going to work. I know.
And then number 4.
A broom.
Okay. And number 5.
A flag. I try to pick things not in this room.
So. Okay. And 5 things are usually, remember I said there's the magic number 7 plus or minus 2. We can usually hold about 7 items in our short-term memory. Right. But if you distract from that, if you start talking about something else or you do math problems, those 5 things usually will leave. So this isn't as impressive for the listener with only 5 things instead of 20. But I can do the same with 20.
I forgot the second thing I said.
Okay. So what I usually do is say, give me a number and I'll tell you the item, a number 1 through 5.
Yeah. Number 3.
3 was pen. And then I'll say, give me one of the items and I'll tell you the number.
Broom.
Broom was number 4. So you haven't asked about 1 yet, which was a coffee cup. You haven't asked about 2, which was a lamp, or about
lamp.
5,
That's
which was
right.
a flag.
Yeah.
So and you can do that with 20 items. You can do that with 50 items.
Yeah.
And people will sit there and go, I mean, when I would do this with students in my classroom, they would be like, I knew professors were smart, but you're brilliant. So I shouldn't have told them the secret. I should have let them think that. But the problem is my wife looks at me like, you're the most forgetful person. And I don't always use this list thing. Sometimes she'll say, well, you go to the store and pick up these 3 things. And 3 things, you don't need a list, a mnemonic trick to remember 3 things. I mean, that's easy. But I'll get there and I'll remember 2 and I'll have to call her. Like, what was the third one? I got this and this. What was the third one? So when I use it, it works really well. But again, you have to use it.
Yeah, if I may, for the listener, I cannot overstate this. You have to understand, when I saw this done, to your point about listing 5 things, which I'm still impressed with my memory, but we were in a group there were at least 50 people in an auditorium. I think there was more than 50, but let's say there were 50 of us, all law enforcement in an auditorium. And you did this exact same trick you're doing right now, and there were 15 or 20 items on the list. And there were random people in the auditorium that you were picking to give you objects. Mm-hmm. So I want you to think about this, a list of 20 things, each one of those given by a different person in a different area of a giant auditorium. And you were able to, someone I think would say like number 13 and you knew what it was, or they would say, because we all wrote them down and you didn't. Mm-hmm. So we all sat with a list of 20 things in front of us so we could see the list. And someone would yell out an object and you knew what number it was. Mm-hmm. So to say that this was impressive to a room full of cops and law enforcement executives, we all thought this was magical. We were like, this is one of the smartest people we've ever met. Because you were able to do that list of all 20 things in any order, so it was really impressive.
It's the only time I've ever impressed a police officer, I think.
That's not
and
true.
There's a whole room of them I impressed.
You impressed everybody with that trick.
I could have gotten by probably with speeding right then if I would have been speeding.
Yeah, no, you could have gotten away with a lot of stuff.
I wish I could save those up and use them later. Anyway.
So let's talk about then how you do this.
Yeah, let's do, because it's, once you learn it, it's like, oh, that is ridiculous how simple that is. And it's using the concept of associations, how you associate things together, and then using imagery to picture things together. So there is one thing that you have to learn if you're going to use this, and you have to learn a set of words. But once you memorize that, then it becomes easy. The method's called the peg word method. And so it's like when you learn these pairings of words, it's like putting pegs up in your mental,
Oh,
mental
okay.
pegs up in your brain that you can hang items on. So here's the list of the 5. They're rhyming words, and you have to memorize these. 1, run. 2, zoo. 3, tree. 4, door. And 5, hive. And there's, you can take it all as far as you up as you want to, getting rhyming words. But here's what the next thing you have to do. Once you memorize those pairs, you have to memorize pictures that go with them. So 1, run, my picture is kind of a Ben-Hur picture of a horse with a chariot race around a oval track, a dirt track where the horses are thumping, they're kicking dirt and everything up, and there's somebody in the back riding in the chariot. Imagine whatever item it is. Imagine those items filling up that chariot, and there's so many, they're falling out and they're hitting on the ground and they're bouncing. So when you said cup, I just pictured coffee cups filled with coffee and just splashing or falling out and everything. And the more vivid you make that image, the easier it is to remember. So if you even add smells, like thinking the smell of coffee and horses and all of that, that's even better. You usually don't have time to do that if you're in a room and people are giving you words,
Mm-hmm.
but in with a grocery list, you could do that. So then you just imagine that grocery item falling off the back. 2, zoo. Imagine peering through the plexiglass at 2 large gorillas in a zoo, and they're kind of facing each other, and they're either fighting over the item or using it in some way. So when you said lamp, I just pictured one just crashing the lamp over the other, and then them jumping up, kind of wrestling and swinging the lamp around. And then now I can say, oh yeah, 2, I remember, is zoo, which is gorillas. Now I can picture that lamp. And 3, tree, it's just branches with pins tied to the branches hanging down. 4, door, I always picture those revolving doors at a hotel, and the item gets stuck. So I pictured a long push broom that a custodial person will use, getting stuck and just jamming the door where it won't move. And then 5, hive, I picture a beehive with the flag just unrolling out of it, just falling down. And so now you say, when you said what was 3, I know 3 is tree and it's branches with pins hanging down. So I said pin. And you said, what is a broom? So I imagine that broom getting stuck in the door. 4 is door. So I said 4. Now I know I've used those 2. So I can just say, you haven't asked about 1,
One,
which was cup.
cut.
2, which
But
was
1, which is run.
1, run. It's the chariot.
Yeah.
And then cups falling out of the back of the
And then
chariot. 2 was zoo. Do you remember what it was?
the 2 gorillas fighting over a lamp.
Lamp. And then 5, I hadn't said 5 is hive.
And so that's a beehive, and there's a flag unfurling.
Yeah, that comes
Yeah.
out of the beehive and kind of flops.
Yeah.
Unfurls there. So, and you can go like 6 is sick. You can picture a hospital bed. 7 is heaven. It's the stairway from heaven with items tumbling down that stairway. 8 is gate. You can do a gate like at a picket fence gate, or a gate at a railroad track, which is what I do, one that comes down and pops back up, just because it's a little bit more unique.
Yeah, but wait, so for 8, when you see the gate come down,
Mm-hmm.
how do you associate the object with that gate?
It's attached to it usually,
Okay.
or the object is the gate. So if you say baseball bat, it might be a really large baseball bat that comes down
Okay.
instead of the
Okay.
gate, or it could be something that's attached to it in some way.
So then this hack, if you learn the rhyming words,
Mm-hmm.
it seems to me the hardest part in the beginning is for each individual to come up with their mental imagery, their picture
Mm-hmm.
of what that word means.
Yep.
So zoo might be, instead of like you see 2 gorillas fighting over the object, someone would pick a different animal at the zoo, and that would be their association that they
Could be an elephant.
right.
Yeah,
So that and holding it in the elephant's trunk.
it could be just one elephant, and they're holding whatever the item is in their trunk. Yeah.
So that's
But it should be, you should have the same, once you pick your your
It's the same
image,
one. That's what I was just
always
going to
stick
say.
with that image. Yeah.
Yeah. So the image is associated with the word. The word is associated with the number that it rhymes with.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can go forward and back. If I gave you a
Oh
number,
yeah.
you go picture, I got the object.
Mm-hmm.
If I gave you an object, you go picture
And then
to
number.
the word and then to the number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And uh, just as long as you practice it, kind of keeping everything together, that number and word rhyming word with a picture become a mental peg in
Mm-hmm.
your brain, in your mind, I should say, a peg in your mind that you can hang objects on. And then, what I sometimes got in trouble with, I would do two or three, like when we were working with uh, manufacturing. We would go to a manufacturing site and I would have like 3 training sessions in one day. And so I would ask the first group, that we would have 20 items. They'd all be going, oh, and then the second group would come along. And now I'm trying to put something else besides a cup into the into the
Yeah.
chariot, and it gets really hard. And then and then by the third one, I'm remembering the first two, and it gets a little bit tough. So if you're going to the grocery store several times a day, uh, maybe you could do, if you're 1 through 6 or 7 or 8, whatever, and then the next time do 10 through
Oh,
18, or
that's a
just
good secondary hack.
yeah.
But I would say if you're going to the grocery store more than one time a day, there's something else that seems wildly inefficient. So maybe,
Yeah, that is. There's other problems you have besides memory.
yeah, more.
So here's another one, because some people might like the second one better. It's a
Okay.
little bit easier. You don't have to remember word pairings, and it's called the garden path. And these are mnemonics, by the way.
Okay, so
And
these
they've
all fall under the trick of mnemonics.
Yes, Nemesis, I think, was the god of memory, and to the Greek goddess of memory. And
Oh,
so it came from that word mnemonic. And back in the Greek days, so 2,500, 3,000 years ago, a long time ago, their politicians, they didn't have teleprompters to give their speeches off of back then.
right.
So they would they would say, okay, I'm going to be in the Colosseum. So the large column to my left that holds up the stands up top, maybe I pick 3 columns, and the first one's, I'm going to say, stands for brotherhood, and the second one stands for law and order, and the third one stands for national love, or I don't know, whatever
Right.
your speech is going to be. And so then under brotherhood, you can think, okay, this column represents brotherhood, and I want to talk about how we have to pitch in to help each other. So you might imagine just somebody chiseling in the word help, or help others in there, and then you say, well, part of brotherhood is also, I started to say lending a hand, but that's helping, right? So
Yes.
so another one might be about sacrificing for others around you. So you could chisel in sacrifice in your mind,
Right.
so that now when you're giving the speech and you're talking, you can glance at that column and see in your mind those chisels and go, this is brotherhood, and the first one is help
Help.
or lending. So you
Right.
can talk about that, and it just keeps you on track. And then you look at the second one, it's about law and order, and you have whatever 2 or 3 points chiseled in that. So they could give these hour-long speeches without notes, because in their mind, they would set these up to keep them on track. And that was, like I said, thousands of years ago. And in our daily lives, we don't use these. I don't understand why we don't use more of these. So anyway, these are mnemonics. These are the
Right.
life hacks. The
Right.
second one is the garden path, and it's where you pick a starting point and an end point in a journey. So let's say that I'm going to pick from my house to the grocery store, and I have certain stops along the way. So my first stop is getting through my front door. My second stop is opening my car door to get in. My third stop is at the end of my drive. I have to take a left turn. So you just add stops, and
Mm-hmm.
then you say, okay, here's the list. The first one was cup. So I'm going to imagine as I go to open my front door, I can't because there's this big, gigantic 50-gallon cup that's really hard to move, and I have to get and leverage it, and it's full of water, and I'm moving that cup of water to the side so I can open my door. And then when I get to my car to open it, the second thing was a lamp. I open the door and all these lamps come falling out. So I've got to clear all the lamps out of my car so that I can sit down. And then when I get to the end of my drive to take a left, there are pins that I don't really want to run over all these pins, but I don't have any choice. So I'm driving over them. They're crunching, they're snapping as I drive. And so each point that you have set in your mind, it's like the garden path. Here's the path I always take. And each stopping point has one of those items in it. So now I can just take my journey from my house to the grocery store and know what each stop is, but the stops have to stay the same every time.
Right.
But then I know what each stop is, and I can make those stops and remember the items. So it's a similar thing as peg word,
Right.
but it's a garden path.
The garden path. I don't know why, but I like that peg word. I'm going to start trying it. I'll let you know how it goes. But
okay.
Because your description of the grocery store is the same thing. My wife will say, "Can you run to the store and we need these 3 things?" And I always, to this day, if she did it right now, I'd say the same thing. It's only 3 things. I don't need a list. And then I'd get to the store and I'd get 1 or 2 things and go, I have to call her and ask her for the 3rd thing. So, right. And the joke that's not a joke is even now, she will write the 3 things in a list. She'll write it down and give it to me and just go, just take the list.
Don't try to remember.
Just take
the list.
Right. So I'm going to try this. It's, we'll see how it goes, but
Casey sometimes will say, do the memory thing on this list. Go,
nice.
Okay.
Nice.
She'll say, do the memory thing so you don't forget. I'm like, okay. And when she tells me that,
thing.
I don't forget. I really don't.
Yeah.
So it's crazy how well that works. So that's one life hack. Do you want to hear another one about memory?
Absolutely. Yes.
So, because as you ask that, I thought, and there's got to be tons of hacks. These are just the 2 that came to mind right off. And since they came to mind, I feel bad. I forget the researcher's name. I was at a conference over in the UK in London and had a conversation with her. We were talking about memory because she's a memory expert. And she said that one of the things that we were talking about recalling things later. And we were also, I actually know what we were talking about. I was telling her about Preflex. And one of the things that we have in there is we have people jot down certain things, like take a few notes about an event that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, that is really good. Writing stuff down is a huge help. It's a really good tool for memory and things like that. But she said, let me give you a little hint of how to make that even better and more effective. And I said, I am all ears to hear this. She said that you have them not write down the chronological or just the like this happened and this happened and this happened. Have them write down the things that are the most meaningful to them of that event. Like they can still do it in order, but don't just say it's not like because this was what we were talking about was working with police officers. So
Mm-hmm.
It's not an after action report where you have to list every detail. I pulled up and then I did this and that. Just say, when I got there, the person was very upset and angry about this. I was able to talk to another person to calm them down, which calmed the other person down. You just write down the things that really stand out to you. And it's usually emotional things that are tied to our emotions. And that helps you, that kind of solidifies those things for later and makes it more likely that you'll remember it with fewer, with a not as great a potential of error when you remember it later, because there can be some errors in memory like we talked about in the last episode. So this reduces the chances of error.
But did you say, so she was saying to you, to the emotional part of it, things that the emotions you remember or tie the emotions to the event will strengthen that memory?
Yes, because any memory that we have that has an emotional component to it stands out more. It becomes more salient. It's a stronger memory if it has emotions behind it.
Oh, wait, the last episode or in one of the episodes, the amygdala is tied to the hippocampus. Is that right?
Yeah, they
Okay.
communicate. Yep.
Okay. So there's a tie in there with emotional response and memory.
Yep. So
Okay.
if the amygdala is active, as you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
then the hippocampus gives more weight maybe to that,
Okay.
and it's more likely to store it. And then also that's when it's emotional, the back channel, which is the non-conscious brain, the back channel is always trying to find patterns or look for things that are going to be important later. So if this causes a lot of emotions now, then something like this will cause a lot of emotions later as well. So I need to remember this so that I'm prepared next time.
And I imagine, so you just brought this up, and my brain is, I don't want to derail the memory and the hacks, but for law enforcement officers, every, I mean, every report that we would write, that I would write that I can remember, it's sequential. So on this date and time, while operating as this unit, I was dispatched to this thing. Upon arrival, this happened, then this happened, and this, very sequential.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you're saying you could still do it in sequential order, but instead of trying to be detailed, especially I was thinking about like journaling. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of the research that I believe in about mindfulness and well-being says how great, good journaling is.
Right.
And when you're journaling, it's like this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And what
Mm-hmm.
you're saying, this information is pick events, and they could still be sequential, but really tie those events to something like emotional.
Yes, I think with police officers, there's a reason why you have to write things down, like you were talking about,
Yeah.
just on a report. But then if you are wanting to increase the chances that you're going to remember that, you
Mm-hmm.
could put more information in your report about those things that were emotionally charged, maybe explain those in a little bit more detail.
Yeah.
And journaling, that's one of the things that this memory expert was telling me. She said I've been doing this for years. She said when you journal, which is what you're talking about, journaling,
Mm-hmm.
usually you sit down and say, oh, today I got up and had a piece of toast for breakfast. I went to the store to do this, like you're on vacation maybe. Then we came back, had a sandwich, went to the beach, and then came home and played games that night. And you just kind of list them out.
Right.
And she said when you look at those years later, it's like you're just reading some words. It doesn't have any memory. But instead, if you would say out of that day that I just described, that while you were at the beach, maybe a really big wave came in unexpectedly and knocked you down, or maybe maybe the sun was really hot that you had a sunburn. Just to, instead of saying, I got up at 8, I ate a piece of toast, instead of journaling like that, just say,
Mm-hmm.
this day was amazing because while we were at the beach in the afternoon, this happened. Then when you read it years later, you're going, oh, yeah, I remember that. I remember that big wave came in and knocked me down. But if you're just reading the chronological list, you're
Right.
going, I don't really remember any of that.
Yeah.
And writing it out, journaling, is retracing all of those memory traces that you're building that solidify them to make them easier to retrace later when you're trying to remember something.
But again, you're going back to the one day on vacation. I'm journaling about it. If it's I woke up, had toast, went through all of those things. I remember going on vacation.
Mhm.
I'll probably remember that, and maybe I'll remember a couple of the experiences. But just writing it down like that is not going to help me remember being at the beach or what game we played.
No, and
But
it's not going to make reading it later any fun either.
right. Yeah, that is kind of a boring journal. But if I practiced training my brain, so my brain asking, "Are we going to do this a lot?" When I journal, if it's like when I woke up and I had toast, and as I was sitting there when the toast was being made, I could smell the smell of toast, and I were whatever about that, liking the smell of toast being made or not or whatever, buttering. So adding detail, and especially adding detail that it's things I like, things I don't like, that would then strengthen that day.
Well, that example specifically will help you imagine having toast for breakfast. Because if you
Okay.
add the smells and the taste, you're going, oh,
Hmm.
I know what that's like. but it doesn't help you remember that day.
Okay.
So you want to take something that happened to you that day that was in some way emotional. It made you really happy, really excited, really sad,
Mm-hmm.
devastated, just whatever strong emotion you feel during a day. That's what you should write about.
So if we were playing the game, sorry to keep doubling down on this. I just want to be clear about if we're playing the game and I say, or I do something that embarrasses me,
Mm-hmm.
and I am humiliated as part of this game, and I journal about that. Yeah, then that might help me remember that whole day.
Yeah, because if you remember, we talked about how with memory you could remember maybe a trip to the beach, but maybe you've taken a trip to the beach every year for 6 years or something, and you don't
Mm-hmm.
know which trip was which. But if you journal about that and then put these four people were or five people were sitting around at the table playing this game when I became so embarrassed, and I was embarrassed because this person said this or whatever. If you add those types of details, that strengthens that memory. So later, if you're to think back on that memory, you're much more accurate of when it happened, which summer you were at the beach, who was there, those types of things. It becomes much more accurate than just leaving that, just saying, oh, I'm really embarrassed, then later thinking about it, but you haven't written about it, it's not journaled about. It makes it more difficult. It doesn't mean you'll be 100% accurate
Right,
again,
right.
because there's these, the seven sins I talked about that influence memory. So those are still there. It just makes them less likely to happen.
Wait, you talked about the seven sins.
Yeah, I mentioned Daniel Schachter, a memory researcher,
Shachter.
wrote a book called The Seven Sins of Memory.
Yeah.
And that's the one where I gave his quote that it's with memory, it's not always what you can't remember. That's bad. It can be what you can't forget type of thing. The quote that
Okay.
either he made or somebody made that he attributed to them.
Yeah. And so the seven sins. Am I putting you on the
Yeah,
spot again? What? So this one is when we talked about summer camp, right?
yeah.
Is that
You know what I did?
what?
We had talked about it, and I had his book, and I pulled it out after our podcast, and I have it
Oh,
right here.
even better. Even better.
I usually don't prepare for these, which is I shouldn't
I
admit
know.
that, but
Uh,
this week I didn't. If it came up, I actually looked at it for my own just curiosity. I was looking back at it, and these are what he calls the seven sins. One is the sin of transience. I don't know why. I mean, sin is kind of a harsh word, but the sin of transience just means that things fade over time.
okay.
So
Okay.
as you go on, there's new things happen to you. If you were stuck in a prison cell where it's just the same thing every day, then new things aren't happening to you, and maybe memories aren't quite as transient. Then you can remember things a little bit better that happened like before you were in prison.
Mm,
But our days are so full of so many things happening, and there's so many surprises, and you never know what the next day holds. So over time, new memories are getting made, and it doesn't mean that they're replacing the old ones. It just means that things start to fade over time.
right. Okay.
And it doesn't mean also that memories are gone. It just means you can't access them at that time. And there's ways you can access them by having people ask certain questions or bring up certain parts of the memory that will, through associations, will bring more of the memory up. But it's just that idea that over time, memory fades.
Okay.
The second sin is a sin of absent mindedness. And that's again the lack of paying attention. I think we talked about
We
this with
talked about
attention.
this, yeah, during the whole episode on attention,
Yeah, and that's where
inattentiveness.
your friend who had to put his keys on his lunch in the refrigerator because he was absent minded. He couldn't remember
Yeah.
where he put his keys.
Yeah.
Uh, Sin three is the sin of blocking, and this is where a memory we can't quite remember it. And there's different reasons. It might have been blocked because it's kind of an emotional memory that you're blocking, but normally it's in just every day. It just means you're trying to think of something, like you're trying to think of the singer that sings that song, and you
Mm-hmm.
can't, or the band, and you can't remember the group or the band that plays that, and you're thinking. And this is where the tip of the tongue phenomenon comes. Have you ever had that experience? Like
Yes.
it's right on the tip of my tongue, and a lot of times you can even say, it starts with an I. I can almost think it starts with an I, and then later you go, oh, Indigo Girls, or whatever. I'm kind of dating myself there.
No, John, that's a deep pull. Indigo Girls.
That's the first thing that popped into my mind. So
That's interesting.
that's the tip of the tongue phenomenon. I love the Indigo Girls. Yeah.
No, but real quick, sorry, but tip of the tongue. Okay, so I don't need to go that far into this because you just said that there's a lot of different reasons why a memory might be blocked.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a bad thing. I don't think you have a negative association with the Indigo Girls, but maybe
No.
I don't know. But there's some reason that, like, the answer. You already said it's on the tip of your tongue. You just can't get it out.
Mm-hmm.
That memory. Okay.
And so like researchers call it the tot phenomenon for tip of tongue. They also talk about the FOC experience, which is FOK. That's close to a bad word.
Yeah.
But that's not quite. Tip of the tongue is that really strong feeling that I know this and I can almost say it. The FOK is the feeling of knowing. Like, I kind of know this, but I can't bring it. It's not strong enough that it's tip of the tongue. It's just I have this sense that I already know this or I've heard this. So there's a feeling of knowing, which is from blocking, and then there's the tip of the tongue, which is blocking.
So every week, my wife and I play bar trivia with a group of friends. Mm-hmm. Pretty consistent. The music round kills me every single week because the music round, you have to name the name of the song and the artist who's performing the song. And every one of the songs are songs I've heard before. And I know for most of them, I know the lyrics, right? The song comes on, I go, I know this one. And I can sing most of the lyrics. And they're like, what's the name of the song? I couldn't tell you. Or, who's the artist? I have no idea. But then when I hear later, when the round's over and they go and tell us the answers, I get so mad. I'm like, I know every one of those.
That was so easy. What was wrong with me?
They're so easy. But I just, for some reason, the music round, I recognize the music. I know every one of those songs, couldn't tell you who the artist is or the song title.
So when researchers study this, they have to try to create that experience. Mm-hmm. And stress a lot of times will bring it about, is more likely to bring it around. If you're under pressure or under stress, you're more likely to have a tip of the tongue experience.
Okay, that makes sense because I am in this group, number one, and it's not modesty, I am the weakest player at that table. Generally, I don't offer many answers. These people, my wife remembers everything. And that's both a good and a bad thing for me, but she remembers everything. And then the other people on this team, just what they know is amazing. So you got
picked because you know the captain of the team.
Correct. Yeah. I'm married to the captain of the team, but again, I do have a little thing of like, I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to be the one to say it's this, and then they write it down and we turn it in and it's wrong. And so I'm admitting here for, however many listeners we have, that there is stress of looking foolish in front of this group of people that I consider to be really smart or really good at trivia. I don't know. So anyway, okay. So
so your back channel is protecting you.
It's trying to,
it's trying to protect you.
Ego just sit stress. There and be quiet. Just sit there and be quiet, dum. Just because then no one will know that you're dumb. You don't have to prove it. Okay, so
you don't want to leave any question.
You don't want to leave any question. But transients,
I'm the one, the weak link. Yeah.
Absent-mindedness.
Transients, blocking. Absent-minded, blocking, and then the fourth one is misattribution, and that's just where you misattribute something. Like you attribute a memory to this person told me this when it was actually a different person, or like the example I think we used in the last podcast about summer camp. It was a different summer camp or a different year that it happened. Mm-hmm. And so then these people weren't there when I thought they were because we misattributed that memory to a different one.
Okay.
Another sin is the sin of suggestibility. We talked about that a little bit too. I think we've talked about it multiple times. Like one is if somebody an authority figure asks you a certain question, you're more likely to remember it because you want to, look smart in front of them or please them in a sense. So the brain's highly suggestible. Also, when I gave the example of watching the videos with cars, a car wreck, and how fast was it going when it bumped into the other car, or how fast was it going when it smashed into the other car? that changes your memory. So you're vulnerable to those suggestibilities, to suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
The next one's a sin of bias, and that's our beliefs and our way of thinking about things or understanding the world will bias our memories. So if we think, oh, this person is really hyper all the time, then our memory of an event that happened is, yeah, that person was out of control. Even if they were calm, we're biased to remember it being a certain way. And then the seventh one is the sin of persistence. And that's the one where you want to forget something and you can't. It's just on your mind all the time. And this is where like PTSD comes in and
Mm.
some of those things, something bad happened and you want to get rid of it and you can't. And it can be really
I
bad.
see. Can
So
can
those are
we?
the 7 sins.
Yeah. Can we go back one to bias? I just had a real quick question about that. Is you brought up, if I have a friend who kind of, I don't want to say overreacts, but they get really heated quickly about things, and then we have an event where they're calm, and my memory is that they overreacted. Is that a schema that I have for my relationship with that person?
Yeah, that's a schema. So, I mean, that's where your bias would come from because that's your schema of that person.
Right, is they
So, yeah.
overreact. And so when I'm remembering the event later, months later, however long later, and go back, oh man, and that person lost their mind over this. They were, pounding the table and doing that. And it was like, no, they were actually uncharacteristically calm. They didn't do any of that. But
Hmm.
my brain, the memory is what I most likely am going to associate with them, which is
Yes.
overreacting.
Yeah,
And
that's
that,
exactly right.
so how is that? I mean, as a schema, do schemas lead to bias in this context?
I mean, they can. It's possible.
Okay.
A schema. That's also where stereotypes and things come
Mm,
from. Uh, and usually, a stereotypical dog is usually right. Like how a dog behaves, you're usually right, but sometimes you're not.
right.
But that's where stereotypes come from. So it can be positive or negative. But it's also it's more than just. I don't want you to think it's just that the sin of bias is just related to schemas. That was one example, but another example would be that event. There were a lot of emotions there, and maybe you thought whatever was happening at the time was really funny, but then months later or a year later, or whatever, when you're thinking about that again, you're at a point in maybe that day you've had a really crappy day and you're upset and you're not feeling good. Now all of a sudden you remember that was a terrible thing that happened and that person, the way they acted was terrible. And now that becomes part of your memory. So now your memory is biased based on your current thoughts.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's several things
Yeah.
can bias your memory. It can be your expectations or your schemas of a person. It can be the mood you're in now. Maybe those movies that you thought that was a really crappy movie, and then later you think, why did I think that? When you see it again, like that,
Hmm.
because your memory of that was biased in some way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not to go down well, maybe we'll stay on movies here for a couple of minutes, but I find that I am more attached to movies that I watched at a certain point in my life, meaning when I was, in my late teens,
Hmm.
and and they're horrible. They're horrible movies, but I still watch them and still like them and still have affection for them. And I can't help but feel like it's because of, that time in my life, whether it was growing or I don't know what, you could probably answer that better, but I do find but I did want to ask, you brought up, because we're on movies, and there are so many movies about, and I could name them if you want, but I don't want to bog down the podcast. But there are characters in a movie with like repressed memories, usually from trauma, right? And so a classic. Well, this movie's old enough; it's not a spoiler alert. But there's a movie called Dead Again, really underrated movie,
Hmm.
psychological thriller, but it's all about repressed memories. And it's probably more than that. But there's, The Machinist, the one I don't like, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. But the key is that there's these repressed memories All of the ones I named are from trauma, of course, but some therapist or there's some technique to retrieve repressed memories in these movies. Do you know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
talking
Oh,
about?
yeah.
Have you? I mean, I don't know if you have seen any of those movies.
Mm-hmm. I've seen some of those you mentioned. Yes.
Okay. Have you seen Dead Again?
I have not. So when
Because
you said that, I
nobody's
was
seen
like,
that movie,
I
but
have not seen that.
Kenneth Branagh. Anyway, it's a really good
Is that
movie,
from
but
is that from your teenage years, or is that more
maybe
recent?
not a good movie. Maybe I'm remembering it differently. But I'm curious because all of these movies, and actually I'll name one that most people know, The Sixth Sense.
Mm-hmm.
Even everybody thinks of it as a certain kind of movie, but the whole point of that movie is that Bruce Willis is a certain type of
Don't say it.
or what?
Don't tell
Well,
the punch.
no,
No,
not
I'm
the
kidding.
ending. I'm saying his
I'm kidding.
job.
Yeah, yeah.
He's a is he a
So,
psychologist?
I think so.
Yeah. So, but
I
like
think so. It's been a while
he
since I've seen it, but I
he
think so.
counsels young kids and tries
Mm-hmm.
to. But the whole movie is him trying to help a troubled little kid like uncover a repressed memory or
That's
these
right.
repressed memories.
Yep.
And so it has me wondering, like, what is the validity? Can a person with the right technique retrieve repressed memories?
Can you get on a mattress and crawl through some pillows and re-experience birth? Is that what you're asking? What some
Is that a
therapists do?
thing?
Yeah, that's to recover memories from birth, and then you can deal with those traumas. So,
That's a first. I've not heard that
oh,
method. So okay.
well,
I feel like I just
biased
brought
you.
up a touchy subject.
Yeah, so I have to be. I don't why I started to say I have to be careful. I don't know why I have to be careful. This is our podcast, right?
You don't have to be careful. I asked you a question about
So,
memory.
about therapy and
Yeah.
therapists and repress memories. So, in our episodes, one of the themes has kind of been having a myth that we bust.
Yeah.
This is a myth, and let's just bust it right
Okay.
now, because therapy, if you're talking about recovering memories and you're going to a therapist to help you recover those memories, you have to be extremely careful, because of some of the sins of memory we've been talking about, like suggestibility and misattribution and some of those things. We know how memory works, and we know that just think about, first of all, it's somebody, an authority figure who's
Mm-hmm.
a therapist, so they already know all the answers. So you're trying to, I don't want to say please them, but you get a very positive response when you say things when you start to remember things. They're very happy with you at that moment,
Right.
and then you can, because of the authority figure, because of implanting, because of suggestions, can implant, just like the car wreck, how fast you're going, you bumped or smashed, can
Mm-hmm.
change your perception of speed. There's a lot of these things that can influence what you remember. And I'm always on these podcasts wishing that I had a few minutes to do a little bit of research, because there's some great examples of this. One was, I think it was in the late 80s, when there was a rash of preschools shutting down across America because of all of the horrible things that were happening in preschools. Do you remember that? And there were trials and people going to jail, and all of that was happening because there was a scare.
I do remember this.
Okay.
I do. Yes.
So since I don't have time to look it up, maybe the listeners, if they're interested, can Google it and find out. But a lot of it came down to, I think it might have happened in the Northwest, was one of the first cases, maybe
It
Oregon
was.
or Washington,
Oregon, one of the two, but it was local to us but if I'm not mistaken, if my memory works, is that it was really little kids who were making accusations against adults, but
yes,
they were being led there.
Inappropriate touching and things like
Yes.
that. Mm-hmm.
But
Inappropriate
it was
sexual stuff.
the way that they were being interviewed, the way that they were being questioned, that was leading them to that.
But we didn't know that at the time.
Right.
And so it's all of a sudden, these kids, as they were starting to be like, wait, what happened? So they take them to like the police, and then the police start asking questions, and then they start coming up with stories, then they go to therapists, and it created kind of this panic across America. And a lot of preschools ended up closing, shutting down. There were so many lawsuits because now people across America started asking their kids, like, what does your, and then they start talking. And as they delve into it, and they're not professionals in knowing how to ask the questions in a right way, they're planting memories, they're planting experiences that maybe didn't happen. And it was a huge deal that researchers turned and started doing a lot of research around it. And this isn't to say that never happens in preschools. It absolutely does. And it's horrific. And if you think it might be happening, it's better to stop everything until you find out for sure, rather than let it continue to happen. So I think a lot of the panic and all was well founded as far as why you're worried.
Right.
But then it took researchers to start. That's where, I mentioned a lot of the research around false memories and things like that came out of that time, and trying to figure out what false memories are. So my point is, you can implant and create false memories, and you have to be extremely careful not to do that. And a lot of time, if you go in saying, I'm going to find a repressed memory, then you're probably going to find one. And that's the bad part. That's the negative side to that. And almost always what you find isn't as accurate as you think it is, or as the therapist thinks it is.
Right.
So if you're going in, and you know this as a police officer, there's different types of interviews that will bring about the best memory. If you say, I just gave an example of a few podcasts ago where you say, did you see a bat in the room? Or say, did you see the bat in the room?
Right.
That just changes how people respond. And so I know there's like the cognitive interview technique, where you try to put people in a certain context and see what they can remember. Those are good for an event that's happened recently. But when you start doing some of those techniques with somebody in their 40s, asking them what happened when they were 4,
Right.
it just isn't effective. And I'm very leery of any type of memory that's mined out of somebody from their childhood. I'm just, because first of all, the brain's still developing. If you have a memory from childhood, that's one thing. But if you go talk to somebody and then discover a memory,
Right.
that's where I say, I would be extremely, extremely careful about that. And most researchers debunk the whole idea of being able to uncover like repressed memories. That's
Right.
debunked by most, not all, most scientists anyway. Not maybe not as many clinicians, but most scientists.
But we're getting, I mean, I would consider what we're doing on this podcast, for my benefit, a very basic view of how the brain works. And in particular, this episode and the last is about how memory works.
Mm-hmm.
But it's when you understand how memory works, even at the surface level, you understand how, the scariest part for me is just the suggestibility part you're bringing up, is like certain words. So not only that you ask a question a certain way, using certain words, not only will I feel compelled to remember it, but my brain, you're saying my mind actually remembers these things. And we can prove that with the modern day technology that we have.
Yeah. Then that did, in a sense, that did happen to that person, because now they're experiencing that and everything, all the fear and everything that goes with that. They're experiencing all that again. So now it's like, well, that did happen to them in a sense.
And again, the amount of certainty that your brain has about that event that, again, did not occur, but your brain in your mind is going, that did occur, and here's the emotions I had. Here's what was all of that is so real.
And now your back channel is saying, we have to avoid anything that's even close to that. So these certain people, we've got to avoid them. Anybody attached to them, we've got to steer clear of. And it just becomes this fear, and it changes everything. It's really It can, the person that's accused of something that didn't do it, that ruins their life too.
Yeah, yeah. Because again, you said this, but in no way, or am I, or I think you saying that there, aren't children who have had very bad things happen to them out of
Horrific
preschool.
things.
They
Yep.
there have,
Yep.
but again, from a pragmatic point of view, because when kids are involved, we do get very protective and emotional, as we should.
And we should. Yep.
But in the case you were talking about, we've just never seen it happen on a scale like that before.
Right.
Right. And so you don't want to turn a blind eye to your child saying something happened. But when you sit your child down and ask the question, we're using certain words in a certain way, that in some cases is where it can get a little bit dicey.
Yep. That's exactly right.
If you don't, so my hope for this podcast, I think I've said it before, let's say it again, is in an hour, there's no way that I can get you to get to the depths necessary on a topic this isn't a university lecture
Right.
in a traditional way. My hope is that you, and I think I said this when I was talking about schools, I want people to be curious. I want people to do their own research and so when you bring up something about the brain, I want someone to find it interesting and go do their own research, come up with the information on their own. I'm trying to inspire curiosity and people wanting to learn about the brain, like me, because I am legitimately interested in all of these things that we're talking about. I learn so much every episode. That's
great. I agree with that. I would like for it to be that, because you don't give me a chance to do my research and collect my lecture notes where I can give a university lecture, which is a good thing. I'm sure the listeners extremely happy that you don't do that. It's us just talking about some things.
Yeah.
So I know we're about to stop, but let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
What was number 4 on the list of 5 things that we created this morning?
4 is door. And the door was the elevator. So it was the broom in the door.
The broom in the door. Yeah. What was 1?
1 is run. It was the coffee cup.
Yeah, there you go. So see, you could probably, and 2.
2.
We'll just do them all
zoo.
Since there's 5.
Okay. 2 zoo. The 2 gorillas fighting over a lamp.
Okay. You did.
Well, Hank, don't give me the number though, please. Give me an object. Well, we already did 3 of the objects, but.
I can give you an object. What's a flag? Where was flag? What number was that?
So flag was the hive? I could see the flag unfurling from a hive. 5. Okay, so 5.
Yeah, there you go. So what one have we not talked about?
Oh no. So we did. Was it 4 door, 3? Oh, tree. 3 tree. Pens.
There it is. You got all 5
hanging
of them
from the tree.
Just imagine if you practice a little bit, the power you can wield from this mnemonic memory hack.
I just did that for real. I just remembered all those.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
I know. It's crazy because that was 45 minutes ago, and you've been talking about so many other things. How did you remember that? It's because of the association, the mental pegs, and you can see the picture and the number, and those pictures are what help you remember things rather than just a word on paper or a word somebody speaks.
Yeah, as soon as I said 1, run, I could see what. So I'm at a point though when I practice this, because I am going to do this, but do I keep your pictures or do I come up with my own? Because yours were pretty strong. When I said run, I could see a chariot, I could see horses running, and I could literally see coffee cups spilling out of the chariot.
If that works for you, if that's a strong image, keep that one. If it's not a very strong image, think of your own. But
I saw 2 gorillas like fighting. They both had a hold of a lamp, a standing lamp, and they were doing like a tug of war.
A standing lamp.
A standing
cool.
lamp,
yeah.
And they were both holding onto it, like trying to pull it away from each other. I could see that vividly in my mind and go,
"That's awesome. That's awesome.
This is crazy."
There you go.
I'm gonna keep working on it.
All right. Sounds good.
I know we're getting really close. Sorry, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you watch any movies since we last spoke?
I have. I started the series Territory. in,
I'm not
in
familiar.
Australia. Yeah,
Oh,
it's pretty
okay.
good. And Casey and I started it, and
Mm-hmm.
I took my phone and put it over on a stand that I would have to get up and walk over to.
Okay.
And there were a couple times at the very beginning when it was slow that I was thinking, I kind of looked around like, I wish I could play Math Doku right now for a little bit just while I'm watching this. And it wasn't there, and it didn't bother me after that. And I stayed focused on the series. It's only an hour. Each episode's about an
All
hour,
right.
but yeah, it worked. And
Good
I
for
thought it was
you.
going to be more painful. It actually hasn't been painful. So
Good. Good. Okay. Well, you're doing
thanks
good. Keep it up,
for the
John. Keep it
accountability.
up. Yep. And thank you so much again for today. I know I keep telling you that we're doing the next topic, and then I keep dragging you back because I just find this stuff so fascinating. I can't let it go. So thank
Good.
you for the memory hacks, and I'm going to work on the peg system.
Sounds
So
good.
all right. I
Uh-huh.
will talk to you again soon.
All right. See you.
Thanks, John. Bye. And that brings us to the end of another fascinating discussion here on John Teaches Sean about his brain. I hope you found today's information as insightful as I did. If you're intrigued by what you heard today and you want to dive deeper, I encourage you to go back and listen to our previous episodes where John has laid all the groundwork for so many of these concepts. We're always looking to continue this journey of understanding our brains together. So if you have any questions about the topics we've covered, or if there's any brain related mystery you'd like us to try to unravel, we'd love to hear from you. You can connect with us on our social media channels. All the details are in the show notes below. Let us know your thoughts, share your insights, and hey, maybe your question will be featured in a future episode. If you like this episode, tell a friend, a coworker, a family member. And if you love this episode, tell two. Finally, if you're enjoying John Teaches Sean about his brain, finding these conversations helpful, please don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. With your help, we can continue on this path and work together to make incredible discoveries about the human brain. Thank you.